Hi, Natalie. Nice to see you, and you're still waking up, and we around we nearly at the end of our day. So I hope you at least had a cup of coffee.
I have one right here, and I actually really enjoy mornings, so it was a pleasant thing to get out earlier than usual and see the sun rising.
Oh, fantastic, Natalie. Yeah, so we really excited to have you around our Zoom roundtable this afternoon, Natalie, and yeah, so for more than one reason, you know, I was reading Financial Planning 3.0. It was one of those books, you know, that when I said to Louis one day, you know, you must read this book. I said, you know, it's one of those books. The first time I read it, it was a little totally over my head. There was parts of it that I could consume, and then there was other parts that, you know, and then I read it again and it made more sense for me, and then I read it again and it just grew on me. And yeah, you're taking the work of your late father further, and what I appreciate and what I'm excited about is also the part of your work that, you know, you took the work of Finology and you put your own total spin on it, you know, putting the energy work around breath and everything to it. And yeah, so there's so much depth in terms of taking a total, I would say, nearly putting a fun approach to financial planning and bringing us out of our heads into our body. And yeah, so a very warm South African welcome for you, Natalie. And I must say, you've got an international audience this afternoon because Dennis is from the UK. So yeah, so, so fantastic. Mark also for joining us, and you, Anita. So welcome, and over to you, Natalie. And yeah, let's have a nice conversation with whatever you want to share with us, and let's converse around that.
Well, Hendrik, thank you very much for having me this morning and inviting me into your roundtable. I, of course, am very excited about speaking with an international audience. I also am just simply excited to expand Finology and see what other people are thinking about these ideas. I'd love to start with a quote from Financial Planning 3.0 that frames the advent of Finology. And it's on page 234, and it goes something like this: economies are not machines, and money contains the stuff of our souls. We must learn to talk about money with new language. And to me, what that boils down to is the profound and personal nature of money in our lives. It is in this huge collective space of the economy, and moment by moment, even when we're not actively engaging in money, we are sitting in a home or an office or a coffee shop that is supported by money. And truthfully, it's part of the net that keeps us within society. And it's how we function. It's how the world comes and goes around in many ways in our modern society. But we have neglected to get down into that deeply personal nature of money, which every single financial decision we make comes from a personal place. And businesses are run by people, and organizations, governments, they're all run by people, voters. And looking at that deeply personal part of it is absolutely an important piece of understanding what money means in our lives and how we function with money. So that was a large part of the reason that my father, Dick Wagner, invented this word, Finology. The definition in the book, in Financial Planning 3.0, is the umbrella term for the various aspects of our personal relationships with money and value exchange. And that is a powerful definition. I love how you talked about that I put my own personal spin on this, because it actually makes me think about that. I think my father would be very proud of that piece of it. He did a lot of coming up with questions, coming up with ideas, And then he wanted to hand them off to other people and have us develop them. And that is what myself and my brother are largely doing in the What is Finology project. One of the things that I think is incredibly important about Finology is that we get out of the conversation of just money and look at value itself that's coming and going around, giving and receiving in our lives. A quote from one of my favorite Finologists, Jen Lawn, is that to live, we all must give and receive. And moment to moment, we are giving and receiving, and that takes place in forms of money, and it takes place outside of money, you know, be it holding a door, saying thank you. A great way to put a finger on this is, why is it important to pair a payment or a service with a thank you? When you pay the bill at a restaurant, it isn't just the tip. Well, you guys aren't from the US, we tip here. Not everybody does that. But just an example of a custom, why is the tip not enough to make the server go home feeling good about themselves? Well, because there's a human component that money doesn't capture. Money does a lot of things, but one thing it doesn't do is replenish the soul. So we're looking at, what does it mean to have actual value coming and going around? And money is incredibly important. We put roofs over our head, foods on our plate with money, but in and of itself, it's really not quite enough. So I think it's very important to expand this conversation and our personal relationships with it outside of just that financial realm and into giving and receiving and value itself. So the current working definition of Finology is the study of our personal relationships with giving and receiving, value itself, and money. And I want to invite people to chime in with questions, if is that okay as we go? These concepts are in some ways very simple and in some ways fairly lofty. I have myself read Financial Planning 3.0 twice all the way through, and that is after spending a lifetime talking to my dad, who was one of those people who just sort of lived and breathed and thought inside of these ideas about money and the human experience. Everything from when he was actually working to after the food was eaten at the Thanksgiving table, inevitably the conversation would turn to something about money in the most wonderful ways. So, you know, my personal experience is sort of just having this umbrella of looking at money and the human experience in this moment-to-moment way, in ways that I think were really fairly different than conventional understandings. I was in college before I realized that many people look at money as this force in their lives that is not a path to self-actualization or a path to possibility as I saw it, but for many people more of a constraint. But what I know in my heart is that it doesn't need to be that way. One of Dad's quotes that I love, that I actually we're potentially going to change the motto of our whole What is Finology project, is because money can and should be used for great good. Now, it's obviously not all of the time, but the possibilities are there. And I want to see money flip from a force at times acting as a force of oppression or exploitation and turn it into something that functions as a path of possibilities. So does that help people get oriented into these basic ideas of Finology and what we're doing? And our purpose is, so when money decisions are made from this personal place, if we're going to understand what's going on with money in the world, we really do need to understand this personal component of it. And that also honors this powerful place that it does hold in our modern world. So some of the problems that I see, the two biggest problems that I see, are the societal tendency to conflate all value into money, that if money isn't attached to something, people dismiss its value. And I think that's fairly common. Or to look at something that generates money as of high value without considering more more variable, more dynamic components of whether or not it has value or not. And then there's the flip side of that, of people dismissing money as simply materialistic or some sort of necessary evil that we have to use in our lives, when really money is an incredible force of creation. That being said, all of this is about how we engage with money. That engagement piece is about our personal relationships with it.
Yeah, the question that comes up for me, and anybody that wants to chip in, please chip in, is the value we give to money. I think that's the first thing to what you saying, and what is that value that we can share with each other in terms of most probably exchange of value. That's the other part. However, then we sit in the larger community, we sit with this paradox of people exploiting other people and even if you go and look in economics 101, which Smith wanted in terms of, or envisaged in terms of capitalism, that was not one of the rules that he put down, was to say not exploiting other people. So we've got that. And then, on the other hand, we've got such a large portion of the whole world that's not even making a daily wage, that not able to live, so your view on that, and how can we contribute to reconciling that? Because actually, I believe there's enough. If we see how much food wastage we've got, how much wastage we've got in the world, there is actually enough. But we due to these paradoxes, we're not sustaining the world. So yeah.
Right, and it seems to me that comes down to people putting a value onto money that honestly doesn't exist. Why do you want so much money for yourself and then having other people without enough? That's a very personal decision. Why would somebody be in a position where that's the kind of goal that they want? And so one of the things that I think a fair amount about is some of our animalistic natures. I am a believer that we are animals at heart, and any animal is going to expand in power until they're checked. Experiences of power are extremely desirable on that level. Whether it's rabbits or jaguars, you're going to see an increase of population, an increase of territory if they have the ability to. And so in many ways, I feel like it's, if not inevitable that people are taking as much power as they can, it is at least predictable. But I also think that we're better than that. I agree with you. There is enough to go around. Speaking for my culture here in the US, I see waste everywhere. And there's so many times that I'm seeing it in ways that seem absolutely unnecessary. I have spent some time traveling the world, and an interesting experience for me was I went from spending 3 months in Kenya at 18 and living with a host family in rural inland Kenya. And then about, I guess, a year and a half later, I went to London for 3 weeks. I then went back to Kenya, and then we had this long layover of about 10 hours in London. So we decided to go out on the town, which was hysterical because it was December in London and we were dressed for equatorial Africa. So we had every single item of clothing we could possibly find on our bodies. And it was a great time, but the paradox and the juxtaposition of looking at being intimately inside of a culture that was colonized to the colonizer, colonized to colonizer, gave me this really powerful view of that disparity, but also it really asked those questions of why, what are people getting out of this? And I wish I had, I sincerely wish I had clear-cut answers for those questions that you're putting forward. I do not necessarily feel like I have those answers, but one thing I've been thinking a lot about is money as a strategy. It has no innate value. The value that money has is entirely projected. It's because we agree upon it. It, you know, has all these various reasons that I'm sure most people on this call have looked at and thought about. But at the end of the day, you cannot eat money. You can't live inside of it. It will never love you back. So what is it that people are getting out of money? And I would say that in some ways it's a story that we are asking ourselves, that we look at money as having this incredible value. And so we want. But in truth, it's not a value in and of itself. It's a strategy to other values. So when we frame money like that, I think we can open up the realm of possibilities from making it an end in and of itself or a need in and of itself. And I'd like to just reference nonviolent communication through Rick Kaler, who I imagine a couple of people know, and somebody who he's working with, Alana Feinstein, that I've been talking to, and they actually were referencing nonviolent communication when looking at these ideas between needs and strategies. And money itself is not a need. It's the things that money gets us. It's the paths that money can take us toward and the possibilities it opens up, the things that we can create through using money as a tool, but then you can also see as a strategy. So in terms of addressing the inequity in the world and the hardships that so many people fall into, I would really like to spread these ideas about money not being the end all be all, but rather as a strategy and reframe it and look at, instead of what does it mean to have money coming and going around, to what is giving and receiving that's going around? What is value itself? And then how does money fit inside of that? Because I do believe in my thinking, money is just a piece of this big picture, that there is, and I as you mentioned, I like to drop into the energy lines. We have all this incredible energy within ourselves that we're born with, and we develop, and then we cultivate our possibilities through education and through relationships. None of that is money. All of that is our own energy. But what we do is we somehow or another take that and we put it out into the world, and we do something that is theoretically productive, that does something that contributes to the world in some sort of valuable way. And then we have money that comes back to us. So, and then we use that money to bring other energies into our lives, our food, our shelter, our travel, our coffees, whatever it may be. But money is really this conversion method between our energy, what we put out there, and then the energies that we need to bring in. So let me think where I was exactly going with that. If we pull back from trying to make money and we look at this giving and receiving and the value itself, I think we can hone into what people are really doing and what we actually do need, and then how can money meet that? Because I personally, and it sounds like you too, Hendrik, I feel a very strong beating heart around these injustices and these inequities around the world. And I'm delighted that you brought it up, because I'm not sure, I feel like all money conversations are open to that. And the planet as well. And I think it's really important that we look at how we bring about these conversations. And when we look at value itself, one of the things that I'm trying to move away from is objectifying value. So we talk about the planet or the earth, and I actually, that linguistically, the is an object. And we are literally objectifying earth when we frame it as the earth. which I think promotes our sensibilities that we can just mine it or engage it and that it's here for our purposes. But all of these constructs that we've created of private property and businesses, all of it, they are constructs. And I own my home, but if you look at that from the perspective of Earth, that's a piece of paper. I'm going to come and go. There is before and there is after. And this is just this construct that we're using to function inside of. And I guess I find that very similar to money itself. There is value that exists before money, and then there's value that exists beyond money. I mean, what is priceless if it isn't the thank you that you pair with your payment? And what is innate value but the food or the love or the parenting that exists long before money? And if our constructs were to fall out for some reason, all of those other pieces would still very much be in play.
You said so much. My head is spinning, but I think the one that I want to add is if we think about money as a strategy, I think I agree, because also Sarah Nickham in that Loaded Budget talks about that, and she actually links it back to the whole Maslow's hierarchy and saying, it's actually money. We can see money as a psychological need, and we've just got different people will link to a different psychological need. And if we understand the psychological need, we can actually say, do we really need money to satisfy that need? But that then brings me to another question. And then the next question, please come from the floor, is if you then see in the work that you do with energy and putting it into your model, is there's a few things. Is what is the energy value I put on the value that I put out to the world? Because I think that influences also what I'll get back. The other part is do I attract or do I actually chase away money? So how do I let it flow freely through my life and allocate it correctly? And how do you deal with that in practice then, Natalie?
That's a great question. And I wish I had all the answers. I do not have all the answers. I agree that there's much more that comes back to us than money in our work. For myself, as an example, I think I mentioned this on the Purposeful Planning Institute call. I feel like this work is for posterity. We have financial engines inside of our What is Finology project, and I have financial engines in my coaching model, but they are not where they need to be to justify the hours and the energy that I put into this work. What does justify what I do for this work is to look at my 3 kids and to say, what world am I building that you're inheriting? And money is a huge piece of what we are doing when we are constructing things. Dad said that it was the bedrock of virtually every human interaction. And he literally meant that everything from strangers to married couples. So it's so funny. My husband is a money attractor. He is one of those folks who's never had a problem earning. He grew up with not much money. I'm in a little bit of a different situation where I've never been in a situation where I've never once not been able to afford something that I felt like was the right thing to buy. It's not high level, but it is certainly sufficient. And here we are as adults. He's the financial backbone of our family. And so what I think it comes down to, however, is that self-worth and understanding. So for me, it's this large conglomerate between the money and all these other pieces. People take and leave jobs all of the time for non-financial reasons. You feel bad about what's happening inside of that company for some reason, or simply the commute is intolerable and you come home and you have no patience left for your family. These are non-financial reasons that are priceless, that inspire people to move positions, even when the money fits just fine. You know, what is that piece? And I think it's very important that we look at it into that larger picture. And I think when people get a sense of, so you brought up my model for the energy work, it's called the money energy cycle, and it's a cash flow oriented piece of things. So it's the energy lines from yourself to your money and back again. And what I love about it is that when you put all of these pieces, when you paint out all of these different pieces, one of which, or the bottom half of which, is how we use money, and you see what it is that are your actual needs in your life that money touches, which is every single need in our life, right? That there's some relationship with money, at least in these higher, no, I would say money touches all of our needs. Yet at the same time, it is not the needs. It is that conversion method. And it's cool to think about that all of it starts with the energy that we hold within ourselves. And so we tap different parts of ourselves in everything we do. So from when we're being parents, to when we're exercising on our own, to what we're doing when we're earning our money, we are tapping into different parts of ourselves and actually putting that energy out into the world. So that is priceless. Yet we have found this way of quantifying all of these pieces into money. And when you look at what you need money to do, from your savings to your coffees, to any debts, to your charitable giving, and all of the different pieces that, of course, I'm not mentioning because there's too many, people see how important it is to have money in there as a balanced conversion method. But it's so important not to look at it in this static way. Everybody's money needs are different, and that's largely circumstantial, but it's also it's extremely personal. Everything about it is extremely personal. And one of the things I think we do that is a mistake is that because money works in numbers, we try to dumb it down to arithmetic, and it's just not. $100 means something different to me than to you, to everybody on this call, and to everybody else. And even to the same person, $100 means something different in different contexts. Are you on vacation? Is it a monthly bill? Is it a one-time thing? Are you feeling really sick and tired that day and you just don't have the energy to not buy something that you want to buy? There's all these different components that go into what money means on a value level, and those numbers are only one piece of it. And one of the things I like about the money energy cycle is that it shows how the numbers are simply just indicators of value. They indicate the value, but they are not the value. They're just this construct for how we rationalize it. And that's incredibly powerful that we've been able to do that. But it's also incredibly powerful that we break out of that and look at the value itself, not simply the numbers. And I just want to share that I did not invent or create this money energy cycle. I discovered it. I was sitting at my desk on a Tuesday morning after my favorite yoga class with my favorite yoga instructor, and I was feeling the energy lines in my body, and I was feeling where they were strong and connected, and I was remembering those moments where I fell out of balance and then regaining balance or falling all the way out of it, and thinking about money in the human experience, as I tend to do most days all day. And I had this vision in my memory. There were sound effects. It was like, and I saw this path, this map of these energy lines from ourselves to our money and back again. And then, it doesn't stop there. We also have the source of the money that comes into our lives that holds its own energy line. So you're marrying your own energy with that money when you actually bring it into your personal sphere. And when you use your money, you're sending it forward into some other money energy cycle, be it a business, a person, both, doesn't necessarily matter. But when you look at it from this perspective, we have literally put a part of ourselves into every dollar that comes into our lives. Yet it still holds that energy of where it came from as well. So it's this dance, and then we put that forward with still that little piece of ourselves. When we use our money, we put a little piece of ourselves forward into somebody else's money energy cycle. And it holds its own energies. So we're really having this incredible dance of our deep personal energy into this shared sphere of the money that comes and goes around. And it goes in and out of these personal places into these shared places. And all the while, it's tapping into and picking up the energies of every person and every business that it touches on this deep personal level. And when it's in our own world, money is so personal. There's, of course, we can see that in how there's privacy issues and everything is confidential, but we can also feel it, that when it's our money, we are protective about it. We are very hands-on with what we want to do with it. And it does have this really palpable, like personal tenor to it that makes it in such an inspiring way. I find it inspiring. It makes it this great connector between our deep personal selves and the shared collective. And there's almost nothing else in the world that's like that. And food is something that's deeply personal and that we take, that's in a shared sphere, and breath. But money functions differently than that. And I wonder if we can reframe the ideas that it's an object or something to quantify into these ideas that it is deeply personal. We do share it, and it's this incredible shared experience. And then it's a strategy that we can, we're giving and receiving all the time. We have to function with relationships to value itself. And we put that into money, but let's recognize that in money so that we can really, so we can have it right sized. And, I can't say that I think I'm ever going to touch everybody who's wanted to hoard money in their lives and just get them to realize that's unnecessary. I don't see that as being a terribly realistic possibility. But if we can have enough people sort of reorienting and rewriting these stories, these money stories, I certainly hope that we can see how this can affect people and planet in positive ways, in strategically positive ways. And we can work towards a world that's just simply more respectful, and in that way more beautiful.
Anybody else a question or a thought for Natalie?
We have a couple of questions in the chat, or a couple of comments, that health is also priceless. And yes, it is. Thank you, Alice. And Mel Jacoby from such a good question to ask parents. And I think that was talking about what kind of world we're creating that our children are going to inherit. It is really important. And I am, for one, hoping that we can take all of this stuff about money. Mel, do you want to chime in verbally for a moment?
Sorry, yeah, it was just the way you actually framed the question. When you spoke about your own personal, oh, there we go, okay. So it's going to probably go off again. It was the way you framed the question, just the way you said it, in terms of you know, that all the work that you were doing doesn't justify, you know, the cost of it. But when you look at your 3 children, you know, it's justified because of what you leaving behind, you know, your legacy that you're leaving behind for them. I just thought the way you've actually framed that was quite profound, in terms of us framing it in a way like that with clients.
Yes,
You know,
I use the word prosperity.
Yes. You know, instead of the boring old, you know, what legacy would you like to leave for your children? You know, it just gives it a more context and brings it home a bit more. Yeah, I don't know if anybody else agreed with me, but it was just a little nugget that I picked up.
See, Mark wants to add there or ask
sure,
something.
there have been so many things said that have resonated, but I think maybe the first thing to say is that given the dollar-rand exchange rate, $100, you're welcome to send it. It definitely means a lot more to us than it would to you.
Right.
The markets are down now.
You know, I remember growing up, I was raised by my grandparents, and they were, you know, they always used to stress, you know, what you put out there in terms of giving and putting it out there, you'll get it back. So you'll get it back tenfold, and, you know, things like that. It would, you know, the whole idea about sharing is caring and all of that. But I think what you're fundamentally talking about is our relationship with and perception of money. I think it's not to oversimplify, but we all seem to be working for the money, but really we should have that money working for us. Now my fundamental question is given everything that you've said, you know, you've just got to look at the papers, listen to the news, watch what's going on in the world. There just seems to be this prevailing sense of there's this growth in selfishness, for want of a better way of expressing it. How do we counter that? You know, it's because you talk about leaving a legacy and teaching our children that relationship with the energy of money, making it a positive energy relationship. But there just seems to be so much self-centeredness and selfishness in the world at the moment. How do we counter that?
I think for every individual who's in that place and promoting that story, that it is a piece, it's a personal path to overcome the idea that more is better, because it's not. One of the things that I work with, along with the money energy cycle, is I work with the money breath. And that came to me in actually a client session when we were talking about the money coming in and out of her life. And I had this aha moment that there's really a breath to cash flow, because it comes in, it fills up our bank account, but it also fills up our lives when we spend it on the various things that we spend it on. And as we do that, of course, there's an exhale, so there's an in and an out. But more than that, our body keeps a natural reserve of money, of breath. But it's not so much that we overdo it, because one of the things that's important, I'm sure you all realize about money, is when you use it, it has this incredible multiplying effect from me to you to every person. It's multiplied person to person, use by use. And when we don't use it, that stagnation, actually, money literally, what is the point of money that's not being used? Sure, savings is a good thing, but after a point, there is a certain falling flat of savings. And one thing that's so interesting is for our bodies, when we inhale, we reach a natural top. You take a deep breath, and at some point you don't take anymore. You have what you need, and you let it go, and you do it again. Money doesn't have a natural top. And in our human places where we're looking at things, I think it's very difficult to understand when we're at a point of sufficiency. And so Gail Coleman, if anybody's heard of her, she works with somatic finance and these ideas about from fear to sufficiency to then to generosity. and working within the body and discovering these feelings inside of these places. But fear is in so many ways the underbelly of our relationships with money, both personally and societally, which is such a shame because it doesn't need to be that way. Money has a beautiful life force, and we shouldn't forget that we're not tied to money when it comes to creating value. There is so much that we can do outside of money that we don't need it for. And we don't need to look at it as, yes, it's a path to possibility, but it is not the only path to possibility. And especially if we use it with things, we can find more and more possibility within that. But that fear, that underbelly, I want to always offer a little compassion to people when that's their place, because it is tied to security. And when you look around and you see people without sufficiency and the insecurity that goes hand in hand in that, sure, of course there's fear. Of course there's fear. But then when you get to a different place and it's people who could have enough, but maybe don't use it in ways that support security or support what they're really going for, their true, what they would truly find satisfying. The fear that's inside of that seems to me more like a story. And we have lots of stories about lots of things, and that's fine. But in the case of money, when we don't find that natural top and we continue to pull in more and more and more, there is a cost to that. And it's genuinely unfair isn't even a strong enough word. It's injustice to do that for one's own self at the cost of somebody else. Yet, even when I look at people who I think have healthy relationships with money, there is still an idea about more being better. And I love to challenge that. What is this more for? Because purposeless money does not make sense to me. One of the great things about money is that you can make it. Maybe it doesn't literally grow on trees, but we do have the energies within ourselves to make money, assuming that the financial systems stay stable. The thing about looking at individuals who don't live that way is that it is a personal journey to go from that place of fear to a place of saying, oh, wow, this is a nourishing money breath. And I feel good, and I can spread it across my life, and I can support the people I love, enjoy the life I need to live. And while at the same time, I get to send that energy forward so it can do those same things for somebody else and somebody else's family or dreams or whatever it may be. But I think it's inappropriate we so often in this world that we're living in, we jeopardize what is priceless in the name of money. And looking at the earth as a prime example, we really do need the earth. And here we are in a relationship with it where we're taking away the things that we need over the long term for this short-term satisfaction of money. And I understand that that's the way our minds work, is that we want these tangible rewards, and money is very shiny. But if we can make these conversations bigger and work with our clients around what does it mean to have sufficiency, and what does it mean to take this energy and use it for great good, as opposed to this idea about more that comes and comes and comes, where does it end? And what does that mean? And what are we doing with that? Again, purposeless money seems like a rather flat idea, but I do think that it is a personal journey. It's this personal relationship with it. So where it comes to clients, I think it's often about asking these questions and putting these seeds out there and seeing what happens when people think about, oh, okay, what is sufficiency for me? And what does it mean to be in a place of being able to use money for great good? And great good is highly ambiguous phrase, and that's okay. It doesn't need to be something specific, but it does need to be real, and more is not real. That is just in the air. When clients retire, they're super protective about their money. Yeah, I agree. And it's not just in retirement. I think that there's a lot of people who get extremely ferociously protective about their money, which is, again, understandable when you think about money being this incredible part of security in our lives. And without it, things can fall apart extremely quickly, because money is how we put a roof over our head. Money is how we have food on our plates today. But food on our plates is not money. So what do you guys think about this idea of trying to break open what money seems to be and looking at value on a greater level? What does that mean to you guys?
I think if I can just make a comment, Natalie,
Please.
I think as, besides Dennis, who's a money coach, us as financial advisors or financial planners, I think we are really privileged to work with numerous clients and their behavior towards money. It gives us quite a wide range or an insight into, I'm speaking specifically for myself, but as much as we're trying to coach them and help them, for me, I also get a lot out of it, and I learn a lot, even about my own money behaviors. And I found something really interesting the other day where parents sent me their 2 kids for one of my coaching programs. And I found it quite profound, where the one child was exactly like the father in terms of his money habits, and the other child was like the mother. And I found it very interesting. They've been both being brought up the same way. And even my conversations that I have with the parents, it's almost like the 2 children sitting together. It was just such a profound experience that I had with the kids, 2 completely different children. And then the parents sitting together with me. I was like, okay, if I close my eyes, one would be the one child, and one would be the other child. But I really think we are privileged to see all these different behaviors. And, if you think about it, most people don't see that, because most people don't like to talk about money. So, you're not going to go and sit with your friend at the coffee shop and, talk to them about their salary or what they spend it on, or, So, yeah, I just think we're very fortunate and privileged to be in a space like that.
I agree. It's so interesting how we can talk to our best friends about almost anything, but money is private. And sometimes I hear some people saying that we should break open this taboo, and I agree that we should talk about money more as a society, but I also think it's okay to say it is private, that there are components to it that are private, and that sacred space with a trusted advisor. I really appreciate how you brought up that privilege. It is a privilege. It's likely the most important relationship in our lives besides ourselves and our families. And even arguably, I think my dad would argue that it's actually more important than those relationships because of how it holds those relationships. And that's why this work is so incredibly important. And I look at people who have small relationships with money, or simply think that more is what we should be doing. And I feel pain for them, and I see so much pain for them. And part of that is simply because it's not true. And when we are existing inside of relationships that our relationship with it is a step away from the truth, to me, that is, there's nowhere to go from there. And rather what what is healthy is to break that open and to right size it and say, money has this wonderful place in our lives, and let's honor that and protect it and be present with it. At the same time, it is not our lives. And money's nature is quite fickle. And Dad says that in the book. There are so many things that money is dependent upon in order to work properly. And if any one of those things were to fall out, money could just kind of disappear. That being said, value is going to continue to exist. Giving and receiving is going to continue to exist. And if we overvalue money and we put all of our perception of what is valuable into this money bucket, that seems quite unsafe to me. And again, a step away from reality. And I think that when we are in relationships and they're not real, that we feel that. And there's a tenor of that unreality. And I almost think that's unsafe. And I most certainly think that we can do much better than that.
I agree.
Dennis, thoughts there all the way from the UK, from your side?
Thank you, Hendrik. Thank you, Natalie. That's been really interesting. Your question around value is I think the way I would look at it is that my experience, our relationship with money has three components. One is, and the core component is, what is my relationship with myself? How do I feel about myself? How do I feel about money? And how do I feel about money and myself? And very often we don't really look at it in those terms. So when you talk about money as numbers and try and reframe that as money as values, I think that's a way of trying to break out of the sort of very narrow views that people have around the numbers side of it. And you're absolutely right to point out that financial literacy is very often this kind of doctrine around, separate wants and needs, and it's all about maths, when in fact it's, all about emotions. So anything that helps people try and step back from focusing on money as just a collection of numbers is really, really helpful. The side that isn't very often addressed is the core of our relationship with everything, whether it's money, whether it's our bodies, whether it's food, whether it's exercise, whether it's our jobs, our relationships with other people, is how do I feel about myself?
I think that's a beautiful way of framing that. And I think that speaks to the earlier question about what we can do when people are not earning what they're earning, or if they're over consuming money. I think it does come down to, how do you feel about yourself and that relationship with the world? If we look at money as that bridge between our deeply personal selves when it's our money and then that external space of shared money, I think that it really does, that's such a beautiful way to put it, because it almost mirrors how you feel about yourself and how you put yourself into the world.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, people say how you treat money is how you treat yourself. I think you need to tease that out a little bit. But there's a certain element of truth in that.
I also really like those questions because they're simple. I think clients can relate that those questions are accessible. I love that.
It's funny that you say that, because if I look back over my working life, if I could put it that way, it seems to me that, look, we can always use money, but it seems to me as if at times when I've not needed it, I've seemed to have a lot of it. And the inverse, times when I could really use it, I've been battling to get it, so it's almost as if there's this relationship that you've got. I mean, I've seen a lot of memes today doing the rounds about, Mr. Amazon, to say he's got so much money, even after giving half of it, even after giving half of it to his ex-wife, that, just how much good he could do if he just used a little bit of it. but he has a relationship with money of his own, and who knows where he is or what he is in that. So I think Dennis has also hit it on the head, and I think Mel earlier, she made a comment about how do you counter that, what's going on by being an example. I think you've got to come to grips with where you are first before you can be an example. And that's why conversations like this are so great, because they make you review how you feel about money and where you are relative to money. Because I think it has a very unhealthy stranglehold on a lot of us, and our perception of success and value being tied into money, which it's not.
Right, and then it's almost, to take Dennis's questions and flip them around, then we start looking at ourselves in terms of money, and which it's not. So.
Okay, can I go and do some retail therapy now?
It's your choice.
A lot of this concept of, money being a taboo is, we don't like to talk about money. I don't think it's money. We don't like to talk about the emotions associated with money. So the real issue is not, what I earn. It's what you may think about me, or what I think about myself around what I earn. So that blocks us from talking about the money. So I don't know if you're aware of this, but I think it's Sweden, and I think it's maybe one of the other countries in Scandinavia, everybody's salaries are published. It's
just out there.
Radical transparency. Everything that everybody earns is available to be seen by everybody.
So how does that work with, surely a woman would look for the richest guy.
Well, you use it for whatever you want. I think the point is...
I'm joking, Dennis.
Right. Yes, so am I think.
I think
the richest woman.
But in the same Nordic countries, a lot of them work on the assumption that when you get fined, it's proportional to your income.
Oh, wow.
So when you get pulled over in that Koningszeg doing way more than you should have,
yeah,
your fine is steeper than mine. So there is some justice.
Interesting.
It's an interesting way of just removing that, and maybe the stigma still exists, but essentially it's there, right? It's all available. I think it takes some of the, it certainly takes some of the inequality out of the society, because it's all visible. And so the way that societies manipulate inequality or drive inequality or reduced, it's not just about publishing people's salaries. Obviously this is something that's been going on in Scandinavia for 30 or 40 years, and there's a taxation element to that as well. But certainly that taboo around not talking about what you earn has gone. Oh,
that's so interesting. One of the things that's so scary about the taboo is it just allows any misconceptions you have to grow and to fester, because you can't clear them up because you're not talking about it. You can't get those external information.
Sure.
And you just have, there's so much that internalization that happens. And that's, I think, a driver in unhealthy personal relationships, because you lack perspective.
That's right. So all you've got is self-judgment or potential judgment that you think others will have around you.
Right. And you don't even know if that's true. It's just what you might think.
So maybe at the end of the day, after we've been around in money circles, maybe there's something to be said for a barter economy.
I'm sorry, for a barter economy?
I have something you need. Stop them. No money needed.
Yeah. Well, and then it brings us to value itself, right? So if it's what is valuable?
Sure. And if you take, if you go back a few, 10 or 15,000 years, value is really easily assessed as what you contribute to the survival of the group that you're with. So it's essentially, if you look at how we evolved, that's, you know, in a way, that's, I think you can look at that as you know, everybody had a purpose, everybody had a value. That was, you know, part of the human psychology. So if you look at social interactions or social hierarchy and things like that, that evolved in an environment where value was about what you contributed, and it didn't have dollar signs on it. It wasn't about, you know, how many rocks you had, or, you know, who had the sharpest flints or whatever else it was, right? Because survival required everybody to support everybody, and the whole concept of mine and yours didn't actually exist. One day you brought something in, and this still exists, I think, in some hunter-gatherer societies in South Africa. You brought something in that was really large, you share it with her, and the concept of sharing is a fundamental part of human survival. It's when we start taking the path of individualism as what's mine is mine that we start to become very obsessive and protective, and security then becomes what I can keep for myself as opposed to what I give to the group.
And it's an individual responsibility to keep yourself secure, which is actually much more difficult and a lot of pressure. There's a book that I highly recommend called Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. And she's actually a botanist with indigenous descent, a PhD botanist of indigenous descent here in the US. She works mostly in the Northwest. And she talks about private property. So in her indigenous culture, there's no such thing as private property. And the idea of owning land was not something that people even, it took a couple of generations for people to start being able to wrap their minds around this idea of land ownership. And she takes that farther into that we actually have created our own types of prisons inside of personal property. And here we've have this epidemic of loneliness that's spreading across the world, and more ideas for my car, my house. It's such a good idea to be a homeowner, all these things. And we are reinforcing these walls of our self-erected prisons through, I love my home, I love being a homeowner, but it's confusing because we strip down that shared connection. And what are we doing to ourselves? It seems beneficial to have private property. It seems great to not have to share, but maybe it's really not, and more of a long-term value model.
Yeah, well, I think you end up back with Yossarian in Catch-22 when he says, well, what if everybody acted selfishly? What kind of a world would we live in then? And the answer is, well, then I'd be an idiot to think any other way, wouldn't I? So we've gone a long way, but your point is extremely accurate, because prior to domesticating animals and crops, we didn't live that way. We couldn't live that way. So once you create that, then you do become very obsessed with land, because you have to invest in it and you have to defend it and you have to, work it, and all that process then creates this kind of private property concept, and that takes us inexorably to where we are today. But we can't turn that clock back, but we can open ourselves up to understanding what the ambiguities around it and what the traps are around it, and the obsession with money because of what it buys is that classic trap, isn't it?
Yes, and it is a construct. One of the quotes I love from the book Braiding Sweetgrass is she talks about commoditizing everything, as we try our best to do, but in material fact, strawberries belong to themselves. And where do we respect the agency of the land, of the insects, of the strawberries? And they are life, and there is value in that. And we project these dollar signs onto it, and we say if we farm it, they're ours. But that's not how it is if you pull out the lens. So.
Well, so many of these constraints are man-made. I mean, I remember being in lecture at university a very long time ago. I think it was social anthropology or something, and the professor was talking about how surnames meant something. Where did the name Smith and Miller and Tanner and all of these sort of things, they either there was something that your family did or your family came from. Are we going to start changing names to Bitcoin? And I'm being facetiously humorous, but if you think about it, I mean, we went from barter or exchange to currency, and now we've got Bitcoin, and where is this human journey going to end or balance out, if I could put it that way?
And
food for thought. Been a great hour.
It's an interesting thought, and let's end on this, because we are about 10 minutes after. Oh my gosh, I just lost my thought.
Bitcoin.
Oh no, the natural tendency for animals to expand in power until we're checked by some means. There's a journey here, and we'll see what happens, but it is not infinite. What we're trying to do with money and commoditization and land and such, it is not infinite. So there will be something that happens that reflects it back to us. And
I remember a fund manager's presentation I went to a while back, and his opening statement was, the human race is consuming the resources equivalent to 1.5 planets. So yeah, it's going to have to go somewhere.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And let's not go as far as Elon, who says that, that's why he's doing all this stuff, because we need to get off the planet because we're killing it.
Right. Which it's not ours to
killing
kill.
Ourselves. Yeah.
And it's really quite sad to think about all the generosity that's been given to us. One of the things that Robin Wall Kimmerer talks about in that book is that we have a responsibility, that we've been given so much by Earth, by weather, by all of the things that have made it possible for us to live. Where's our responsibility for thanks? We don't tend to let our parents just wither away without consideration to how they need to be taken care of. It seems very similar to me. And where is our responsibility to have reciprocity for that which we've been given? And that is certainly part of why I'm here, because I've been given the gift of being raised under my dad and my own personal insights. And I feel a huge responsibility to getting these ideas out there and helping them, to planting seeds and helping them grow, and looking to you all to water those seeds and to maybe harvest some and give them to other people.
Well, I mean, they say if things carry on the way they are now, there'll be more plastic in the oceans than fish in 30 years. So I think Mel has hit the nail on the head, and you've hit it on the head too. We need to go out there and be examples and drive it, because change has got to start somewhere.
Right. And, we're not going to change. We can't get into other people's heart spaces unless they invite us. And there's going to be people who are not living these stories that we're talking about right now. That doesn't mean it isn't worthwhile to continue to grow them and to invite those who do choose to take on these stories into this space that is a bigger view, and hopefully will bring about a world that is not only sustainable, but continues to be generous for those that come after, because they are beautiful.
Unless your name's Vladimir Putin. Good luck, whoever tries to convince him.
Yeah, right, exactly. I'm guessing it's not going to be me, but
not even his wife.
Right. Well, I want to thank you all for being here today. I know a lot of people need to go, myself included. This has been wonderful. I gain so much energy from these kinds of conversations and from hearing from you guys and the opportunity to get these ideas out there. So I just want to send you a heartfelt thank you. And please reach out to me if you'd like to talk more. My email address is natalie@whatisfinology.org. And I'll type that in the chat here. And I invite further conversation, and please let people know that these conversations are happening. Thank you so much.
Natalie, Hendrik asked me just to say thank you on behalf of the group. I want to comment on your presence and the intentionality with the words. It's wonderful to experience that and just sharing the work that you've created from your dad's legacy and turned it into your own. Thank you for gracing us with your presence, and all the best.
You too. You too. You are very welcome. And thank you to you all. Thank you for the invitation and the honor.
Thank you for everybody that joined, and all of the best for the month until we speak again over a month's time. So thank you very much and enjoy your week.
Thank you.
Stay blessed and safe, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Cheers all.